So today's LeetCode is going to be trap in rainwater. So we're given an n non-negative integers representing an elevation map where the width of each bar is 1. And we are tasked with computing how much water it can trap after rain. So let's take this example. So in this problem, we are given an array of integers. Each integer will symbolize the height of whatever land this is. And we are tasked with knowing how much or returning how much water is in, or how much water can this land hold, right? So for example, in this case, we have this land here and this land here, and in between them, we have 1 unit of water, we can say, or 1 water. And we are tasked with knowing or returning how much the entire array or the entire land can return. Anything before or after can be considered as 0. And so we will demonstrate a little, I guess, can do a 2 or 3 element array. For example, if we have this land, right? And let's say this is 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So if we imagine that each one of these is considered like as 1, so the amount of water that can be trapped between these 2 pieces of land, I guess, is this much, right? So it is 2 elements. Why? Because the left one's height is 2, the right one's height is 4, and in between them, the only amount of water that can logically sit between those is 2. If it was any more, then it would spill to the next unless anything before it was even higher. Does this part make sense? And does anybody have any questions regarding that? Yes? No? Okay. All right. So anybody has any ideas on how we can potentially solve this? For example, in this example, is there any formula that you can see that would help us solve this? Why or how would we know that 2 is the amount of water that this array, we would say that is 204 would return? Mhm. And so knowing that the left boundary is 2, the right boundary, yes. Go on.
Yeah, so an approach something along the lines of the
Yes.
two-pointer would be kind of ideal so that we can be able to um, identify where the left boundary is and the right boundary so that we can determine how much water that particular box or container can hold, or a bucket. Yeah, we call it a bucket.
Yes. True. And say we have our 2 pointers, one is pointing to here, the other here. How would we find how much water we have between the 2?
Oh, so the lesser one, the one that is lower, is obviously going to be the lower boundary. So that's the one that water will spill over. So that's the one we should probably keep more mind to. I don't know how the algo will be because that's why we have you.
Okay, so the lower, I think there's a little bit of a lag. We'll go on.
Okay, so I was saying we will need to identify obviously the one that will be the lower boundary or the lesser value, because that's the one where the spill will be happening from, right?
All right, so in this case, we have 2 is the lower boundary, and we just concluded that 2 would be the number of waters that can be held here. So if for this and this being like land, will so this is land, and this. How would we do one here?
Okay, so assuming we know that the left boundary is
I would
2, okay, you can continue if you're going to tell us. So we'll just need to know the height of the current element.
no, I think there's a lag and
Yeah, so we will need to know the height of the current element and the. So in this particular case, we would need to know the height of the element on the left, so that will be our peak.
so left,
And
what's it called? Like left wall minus current element, or the minimum between 2 barriers.
yeah,
Or
so the minimum between, in this case, it will be the left one, but I guess we don't know for sure going forward. So it will have to be the minimum between the two of them, I guess, left and right boundaries.
okay. So for example, now let's take an example from here. If I was to want to find this, what's okay? If I was to want to know the number of water that can be trapped here, which walls would I look to? Would I look to the ones that are directly to the left and to the right?
You mean for all, not direct, they can't be directly to the left and right because we don't know where the last lowest value was. So we'll need to know the peak or the last peak to which the water will reach to. I don't know if I'm making any sense. So we kind of need to know where the top of the bucket is. Then we can keep that value so that when we continue, even if we go to the next value, the peak will still be the same as what it is for the current element. Does that make any sense?
So would it be correct if I said the amount of water that this can hold, or the walls that we should be taking into consideration are the lowest of the 2 highest on both sides? So for example, in this case, the walls per se that we are interested in would be this one and this one.
Yeah.
Why? Because this one is the highest on the left and this is the highest on the right. And the lowest of the 2 highest is the one that determines the height of the current water.
Yeah, that's correct.
Correct?
Yeah.
All right. So let's write that down. So the lowest of the 2 highest peaks determines the height of the water. Okay, now knowing that, and with what you said about there being 2 pointers, so we have 2 pointers. Do they start at the beginning? Do they start at the end? And how would we, I guess, keep track of what peak, right? Since we are now looking for both the left and the right, how would we do that, being like fastest as possible.
Oh, okay. So I haven't actually thought of that part. So I think we'll obviously we need to keep track of. So yeah, though we can do both ends as you placed it, but I guess we also need. Okay, I haven't really thought really well about that part.
Okay, let's leave these pointers for now and let's actually understand what we need to do, right? So say we only have one pointer and we start with here. We, based on what we just learned, we need to find a peak to both the left and the right to find the lowest of them and compare it with what we have. So as we go, we need to keep track of which one is the highest peak on the left and also potentially find the peak on the right. So if I am, for example, in this position, I know that the last peak was 0, I am at 1, but I also have to look forward to whatever I have in front of me to find this peak. The laser. So I need to see forward in the array in front of me, and that would be my right peak. And then I would have a way to, I guess, keep track of the highest peak on the left. And that way we can, I guess, go elevation by elevation and count as we go. But that would be of a time complexity of O n squared. And I believe the LeetCode does not allow that. Not in the requirement, but it would be like a time limit issue. So how can we find peaks in both sides so that also going in one pass, so we don't have to loop through each element as we go to find peak on each side. So if we were to have 2 pointers, for example, we can have each of them find the elevations, or this one would find here and this one would find, for example, this, and anything in between, we know that these are the maximum for that space. But for example, say that I am in this position and I, for example, count this as the maximum, as my peak, I know that nothing before it is higher than where I am. And same here, wherever I record this as a peak, I know that nothing before it is higher than where I am. So say, for example, I start from here, this starts from here, and let's say that each pointer is looking for the highest peak and is recording that in a variable somewhere. Let's make these bigger so they're more visible. Okay, so let's say that this pointer has an elevation of 0. This pointer has an elevation of 1. Somebody has some background noise. Not sure if it's a question. So this pointer right here has an elevation of 0. As I said, this pointer right here has an elevation of 1. So let's, as I said, say that each pointer is looking for the next peak. So we're moving this pointer right here to find a peak that is higher than where it is, and a peak on the right that this is of an elevation of 1, right? And we keep going. It doesn't matter since they're both the same. We could move each of them, but we could have a preference for the left, but it truly doesn't matter. We move forward. Now we know that before that, in this little part that we saw, so in this little elevation, I will mute you. I'm sorry. There's a little bit too much noise. Okay, thank you. So in this little array, we know that this one that we just passed is the highest, and we recorded it as the highest of an elevation of 1. As we moved on, this is a lower elevation, and we also have an elevation on the right that is also 1. And the lowest of the two is obviously 1. 1 minus the current that we have. So we said here the minimum, so 1 minus 0 is 1. And that is what gave us this 1 water here. If this was any higher, it wouldn't matter because the minimum of the two walls is what matters. This could be as high as it could be low, but the one that is next to it, that is the minimum of it, of the two, is the one that we're taking into consideration to compare with our current element. And then we count that as 1, and then we move on. Now, we have, this is an elevation of 2, this is an elevation of 1, right? So 2 is bigger than 1, and now we record that as it is both bigger than our previous, our right pointer, and now recording that as a maximum peak, we can now move on knowing that this is our highest on the left. Since it is now high and the right one is lower than the left one, we can now move the right one so it can find a higher peak than the left. So the point of the since now the left highest elevation is 2, now the one here, the pointer on the right, will try to find a higher elevation. So now since it is a 1, it will move forward, it will find a 2. And since this is a new height, there is compared to not a peak, then we can just skip it and move on. Recording this as a higher, then both of them can move freely, since we said we have a preference for the right or the left, it doesn't matter, but we can have this one. Let's remove this. Now, in our current position that we have a left peak of 2, right peak of 2. So let's have that as a peak. Let's have this as a peak. Okay. So since now we have, as I said, a left peak of 2, a right peak of 2, we moved this pointer now to a current position of 1. Now we have the minimum of two walls. The minimum of 2 and 2 is 2, minus the current element. The current element is 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. So now we recorded one unit of water. And then done. Now we have this current element is of an elevation of 0. We still have the left peak of 2, the right peak of 2. And so minimum of 2 and 2 is 2. 2 minus 0 is 2. So we have 2 units of water. So we keep going through the array one by one. If we find a higher peak on the left, we keep it there, and then we move to or if we find a higher on the left, we keep it there, we move to the right, and until it finds a higher elevation than the right, or the left in this case. And it keeps going, it keeps rotating between the two until they meet at some point. Until they meet at some point. And in that case, our loop is over, and then we can just return the number of water that we have found. Does that make sense? Are there
I think it makes sense, but why does this approach work?
I did not get that. Why what?
I understood how this works, and it gives the right answer, like it finds the correct solution, but I don't know why. I mean,
You don't know why.
yeah,
Okay, I can go back to this example. So the point of this is to find the highest elevation on the left, the highest elevation on the right. And since we cannot keep going through the array of finding the highest elevation, we can have this pointer go from the left and this pointer go from the right, and each of them will try to find the highest peak. And that one will be used to calculate the number of water in each place, right? So if I am in this point, right? If my left, let me remove. So wherever I am, so I know for certain that anything before this pointer or before the maximum elevation of that pointer is smaller, right? And we also know that this pointer is for sure smaller than the other one that we're moving. Why? Because this pointer only moves if its maximum elevation is smaller than this one, right? So if I am here, the pointer is at the last place, and this pointer is at the very beginning, we only move this pointer because it is lower, the elevation is lower than the right pointer. So the thing that we know is this pointer has the smallest elevation, the pointer that we're moving has the smallest elevation, and its elevation is the highest from the side that it's moving, right? So this pointer's elevation is the highest amongst the left one. This pointer's elevation is highest among the right one, right? It doesn't matter what's inside because we have not seen that yet. But as you go, as this pointer moves, we know that anything that passed it, we have recorded the highest elevation, and we also know, as I said, that it is smaller than the other pointer. Does it make sense?
yeah, I guess so.
As knowing on, okay. Any more questions before we start on some pseudocode? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. So let's start on. I heard something. Okay, so as I said, we have to. Can you hear somebody talking? I'm not sure if it's a question. Anyways, so we have two pointers, right? One on the left, starting from 0, and one on right, and it's starting from the end or the length of the heights. All right. We also have two maximums because as we move our pointers along the path, we are keeping track of which maximum it is passing. So we have two maximums that we're keeping track. We have the left max that we could start with 0, or let's keep it as left max, and we have the right max. Okay, since both these pointers are starting from the end and the beginning of the array, we can safely say that these points where these pointers are the highest elevations that we have recorded. This pointer only knows this position. So for this pointer, or for us, this is the highest elevation so far of the left side. And the same thing for the right pointer. This current elevation is the highest elevation for the right side. So we can initialize both of them to 0, or we can initialize them to their corresponding starting position. So the left max would be h of left, and the right max would be h of right. In this case, h max would be the first position, and the right max would be the right position. Good so far? Okay, so now we will have to initialize our counter, which equals to 0, and we will have to loop through the array until these two pointers meet. So while left is smaller than right, so while they don't intersect, let's bring this here. Okay, so while the left is smaller than right, then we check, as I said, we start with our current position. We compare the current position, the elevation between the current positions. So if my current, or if the left one's position is smaller than the right one's, I guess, elevation or position, if the left one's elevation is smaller than the right one's elevation, then we need to find a higher elevation for the left. If the right one is smaller or lower, then it needs to find a higher. So if this left pointer's elevation is smaller than the right pointer's elevation, we check the left. We check the position of the left, whether we can add anything to the left so it can move on and look for a higher elevation. So if elevation, or let's just say if left elevation is smaller than right elevation, and here where I say like the preference for left or right, we can just do equal since we will have an else after, but let's just keep it like this for now. So if the left's elevation is smaller than the right's elevation, so this is the one that needs to be moved, that needs to find the max, the overall max that we have, because it could be that we are here, for example, right, and this one is smaller than the two before it, or it could be that we need to record this new elevation, right? So we check the current position that we are, the current elevation against the overall max, so we know if we want to replace it. So if let's just say h left is smaller, or let's say it is bigger than the max, the left max. If it is bigger, then it needs to replace the left max. If it is not bigger, if it is smaller or equal, then we need to see if it can hold any water, right? So we have our right, we have our left, but since we are moving the left, that the left is smaller than the right, this is the key point that would make us almost a loophole against finding a right max or right peak, since we know that the right is bigger than the left if we are moving the left. If we're moving the left, then its side is smaller than the right side. That way we can only compare against the left since, as already said, it is the lowest of the two highest peaks. And the left peak is guaranteed to be lower if it is the side that we're moving. So in this case, if we're moving the left, we can guarantee that the left peak is smaller than the right peak. In this case, we can almost remove this minimum. Instead of the minimum of the two walls, it can be the corresponding wall minus the current element. So if it is the left wall that we're moving or the left pointer that we're moving, then it is the left peak that we're comparing against. So our counter is going to have plus equal the corresponding wall, which is the max. So left max minus the current elevation, which is h left. And the same thing can be done to the right. So let's just take this and we can copy it, paste it here. So if the right elevation is smaller than the left elevation, or is just else, it's smaller or equal or just smaller, it really doesn't matter. So if h right is bigger than left or right max, then we replace right max. Else counter of right max h, and then we just return our counter. Does this make any sense? Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, sorry.
Go on.
Okay, nice. The aim of the challenge, what is it? Is it to find the number of elements that can hold water, or what? I came in a bit.
The aim of the challenge is to find the number of waters that can be held. So these blue squares are 1 unit of water. We need to find how many waters that can be held in this contraption. So compute how much water it can trap after raining. So if it rains here and all the water that can seep out, seeped out.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Okay. Any more questions about this? Of course. If no questions, then we can just turn this into code. All right, so we have 2 pointers. The left one that starts from 0, and the right one that starts from line to h. I will just have this be h to make it easier. And so the right one is at the elevation or at the position of 0. The right one is at the last position, which is len h minus 1, since this is the last position or last index. And then the left max is h left, the right max is h right, and then we initialize our counter. And while left is smaller than the right, we check if the elevation of left, which is basically checking for h left. So the elevation of the left pointer is smaller than the elevation of the right pointer, which is H right. So if H left is bigger than the left max, then we replace left max, which is basically just equals H left. Else we up the counter with how much water that can hold. For example, in this case, it is only 1. In this case, it is 2. And the same can be done with the right one. So if H right is bigger than right max, then right max is H right. Else, if it is not a higher elevation, then we can just count the number of waters it can hold. In this case, I believe at left, H right. And yeah, and we return our counter. I don't think there's any typo anywhere. So let's run this. Oh, we forgot one vital thing, is to up our counters. This is gonna keep looping until it errors out. So after we do everything, since this is the left one that needs to be moved, so left plus equal 1, and after checking the right, then we move the right pointer. I believe that would solve it.
We're moving the right pointer to the left or to the right?
So, oh, yes, yes. Yeah, I'm moving it back. So, needs okay. All right, let's submit it now. All right. That's not bad at all. Okay. There are, I believe, slower methods of just having a window that can keep expanding complexity of n or O n squared. This one is of a time complexity of just n, which is good. All right. About the solution. Okay, so in this GitHub, we're gonna start to upload every code of they want to like do these LeetCode or solve these leads repo and just make, for example, add their solution. All for joining. And yeah, that will be it. Have a good afternoon, everyone.